Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Computomics podcast. We have a really great guest today. He has a 30-year career in government relations, industry representation, public affairs advocacy, and management. His core areas of expertise include agriculture, food policy, and international trade. And currently, he's the president and CEO of the American Seed Trade Association. Andy LaVigne, so great to have you here today.
And it's great to be with you and really appreciate the invitation to join you and talk to your crowd today.
I'm going to hit you a little bit out of left field with the first question. I'm super interested. You're a poli-sci, you did poli-sci at the University of Florida, a Florida Gator. How did you end up in the seed industry? What drew you to this industry?
Well, it's one of those stories that you don't imagine, and I didn't go to college to become an association executive, and didn't even end up in growing up in agriculture. My father's a pilot with the Air Force, and ended up coming to Washington, D.C., very interested in politics and developing policy from my college career, and ended up working for a Florida member of Congress in agriculture. So I handled everything from dairy to livestock and sugarcane and vegetables. And so that diversity gave me the love of agriculture I have today, and through a couple of other career jobs with the citrus industry in Florida and the Fertilizer and Agrochemical Association, had the opportunity to come back and work with the U.S. seed industry here in Washington, D.C. again. And it's been a great ride. It's a wonderful industry, and the diversity that we have is absolutely incredible. So great industry to work with.
Now, the American Seed Trade Association has several goals, one could say, right? Several things that you do. Could you give a quick summary maybe of what your focus is?
Well, I think one of the things right off the bat, Anna, is the diversity of our sector or our association. We represent everything, we like to say, from alfalfa to zucchini and all production types, organic, conventional, and biotech. And it really is a choice of the company and a choice of the farmer on what they choose to plant and what production type. And so we represent them at the state level and state capitals with respect to policy and legislation being passed and movement of seed between states. And then in the national level here in Washington, D.C., again, with the policies that are impacted. And then the international level, the American seed industry is the largest seed industry or seed sector in the world. We drive a lot of policy domestically and internationally, so we have to represent our position and opportunities on a global basis as well. And as we all know, seed moves globally pretty freely, and it's important that there are good, clear policies. So as seeds are crossing borders on that global basis, the rules are clear and things aren't held at the border, because it's very important to be able to not have that stoppage of flow of seed when we're doing research or we're doing multiplication or we're selling to our customers.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you say that is one of the main challenges, or how would you describe the main challenges of ASTA?
Well, probably a couple of main challenges. A lot of people don't understand that breadth of the seed industry and the importance of being able to produce a seed this year for a farmer to plant next year. We don't just have them on the shelf waiting for people to come in. You have to produce seed every year to supply that demand. And so that's probably the biggest basic challenge. But as global trade continues to increase and that opportunity to breed globally and multiply globally, the understanding of governments is not as high as we would like it to be. So we need to better educate our governments to help them understand that importance of movement and making sure that they understand what the seed industry does to clear border customs requirements and things like that. So a lot of interaction and handholding with governments around the world.
I'm sure you're not allowed to share, but you can, like the really like possibly horror stories that might entail. But can you recall like a fun episode of such a situation where you would have to explain to someone, maybe in a policy context, what the seed industry is about?
Well, just in working with a certain country in Asia, they're used to buying grain from the United States. And we were looking to move seed into that country to be able to multiply and to do research and multiply in that country. And they were used to whole semi-truck loads of grain being moved in their country, and they were concerned about what happens when the truck rounds a corner and it spills onto the road, goes off and grows in the ditch. Mm-hmm. Well, we explained to them that seed is so valuable, we don't ship it in that kind of a shipment. We put it in bags, and it's very well tight, and in a lot of cases in small envelopes because it's small packages. And we literally had to show them that process so that they better understood the difference between large containers of grain that are used to feed livestock and small packets of seed that are very valuable and that are used for research and multiplication. And it's just that things we take advantage of and we just take for granted that most people associate, well, it's a corn seed, therefore it's grain, and therefore it's going to be fed. It's like, no, it's not. We're a completely different industry.
Wow. Okay. Well, given that it is so global and that you mentioned the border crossings are a big part of what you have to think of with regards to policy and talking to people, the pandemic must have been a huge challenge. How would you say did the pandemic change the seed industry or what you are doing?
There was some things that hit us right from the beginning that we just didn't anticipate, and I don't think most people could have. As you can imagine, a lot of the seed for research and multiplication move in the bellies of commercial airlines. And first couple of months of last year, commercial airline flights shut down more or less. And so you did not have that track. And so we had to spend some significant time reaching out to commercial shipping air freight companies to be able to see where can we fit, our companies into their packaging and their movement. And it's a challenge because everyone was all of a sudden looking at that too. We weren't the only ones in that case. And then you think of things where with a pandemic, you don't have as many people on the borders looking at shipments and looking at the movement of products. And so things began to get backed up. And so we really had to make sure that we were considered an essential industry and help people realize it. And at the same time, our companies on the ground here in the U.S. were delivering seed for planting because it was March and April of last year. It's a very heavy planting season throughout the country. Mm-hmm. And so you had all of those various factors, whether it's domestic or international. And it'll be interesting to see how that impacts us long term, because farming is such a one-on-one basis. You're already dealing with social distancing. I mean, farmers are by nature individualistic. But the relationship with, say, a seed company and the seed salesperson is very, very close. And it's something that the seed company wants to make sure the farmer is getting what they need and it's performing like they anticipate. So you're constantly going out, walking the field, looking at the plants, looking at the growth, making sure that performance is there. So it caused some challenges in that way and pushed the seed companies to think of new ways of doing business with their farmers, ultimately their customers.
Interesting. Can you go into what those new ways are, or maybe give an example?
Yeah, I think the best example I heard from one of our companies in California who were looking to do their demonstration plots. And all of a sudden, there's nothing better if you've never been in a vegetable field to see the diversity of color and size and flavor of vegetables when they're in a vegetable demonstration plot. Well, they couldn't do that. And so we had a company who they rounded up their young graduates who had done all this work in their master's and PhD theses recently, and they were very comfortable using their iPhones to take videos, and they literally packaged up fruits and vegetables, sent them to their customers, and then they walked their grower customers through their demonstration plots while the customers looking at the vegetables. And so they did the most virtual demonstration possible of their product. And they did this within, I'd say, 90 days of the start of the pandemic last March. And so it was very creative on their part, but they put their company's hands in the hands of a bunch of 20-year-olds and said, we need to be able to bring our product to our customer because they're not going to be able to walk through the field and kick the dirt and taste them. And so that's what they did, and it was quite innovative.
Nice. Yeah, I guess that's what this amazing challenge has forced all of us to do, right? To think maybe of new ways, be creative. I was thinking about the expo that you usually have, right? The CSS and Seed
Yes.
Expo in December is usually something that happens in Chicago on site, obviously. And last year it had to go virtual. How was that experience? And what would you say, what did you take away from it?
Well, the experience itself was very good. We were able to reach people that we would have never been able to reach. And I think from the presentation standpoint and our discussions on policy, we had better turnout than we've ever had. And it's because we did have a larger group of people from around the world who could not have traveled to the US for whatever reasons. And they were able to participate and listen to sessions as well as be involved in policy discussions. The takeaway that was, I would say, on the negative side is it was much more difficult to do the networking component. A lot like I talked about with respect to demonstration plots. The CSS Chicago meeting relies on that interaction, and whether it's running to people in the hall or down on the expo show floor, or even in the bar at night or going to dinner, those relationships you can't replicate in a virtual environment on the computer. And so that was a bit of a challenge that we realized very quickly that on the one hand, we can get that increased participation and awareness of the U.S. industry in corn and sorghum and soybeans. But on the other hand, you can't replicate people just running into each other naturally and developing relationships or renewing relationships that they only typically see once a year in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. I saw on the website that you also had the survey feedback that where you asked past and open member and past attendees, basically their feedback about the expo and what did you gain from that survey if you already got a chance to look at it?
Oh yeah, we've analyzed it. I think Anna, every which way we could possibly analyze it to find the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think again the positive is virtual is here to stay. There are parts of our meeting that will be open to people around the world. And our hope is that companies will look at it from the standpoint of as they identify young leaders, they may not be in a position where they could go to a meeting like Chicago because of resources or financial purposes or timing, but they can still participate by dialing in, taking 2 hours and watching on the virtual platform. And so I think that will continue, and we'll continue to have more and more international participants. On the other side is people were very clear. We don't want to network virtually. We'll do it when we need to with our customers and with our competitors or others that we need to interact with. But a virtual environment is not the right platform for networking and developing relationships. We want you, ASTA, and other organizations like us to continue to provide that face-to-face forum for us to be able to operate. And so we're looking forward to December this year. We think it's going to be one of those everyone coming out of hibernation and being able to interact, renew old friendships, and really spend some quality time together to get back, catch up with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Can you go into a little more detail on the plans that you have for the Onsite program?
Well, we're still developing them, and we're going to go through a lot of our usual activities with respect to Dan Bossi will be back with our economic look, both on the domestic level and the international level. He's usually our biggest selling point or biggest turnout of a crowd in that we get 600-700 people go just to listen to Dan's predictions, and he really gives a good global perspective on what's impacting those grains. We're going to have a number of people talk about coming out of COVID and coming out of a pandemic and what does that mean and what did we learn. We'll have a number of opportunities for young leaders in the industry to interact with more senior people who have gone through a lot of the activities, through the ranks and through the different size companies and pass through experience. And then we'll be looking at some of the policies. What does sustainability mean to our sector? And then what does it mean to our customers downstream all the way to food on the table or feed in the livestock community and those kind of things. So it really is a pretty diverse platform. But we're also looking at our expo. How do we make that what we're calling a series of villages about key parts of the industry working together, and how do you set seed treatment and conditioning together, and genetic analysis and computation in one area, and equipment and implements in another, to really showcase them not only to our participants but to our virtual audience. Then the last thing that we're looking at doing, Anna, is really trying to step up our activities on the networking component. Can we set up areas throughout the hotel? It's a very big hotel in downtown Chicago, so set up those areas throughout the hotel where people can gather in manners that are similar to our expo show villages. Here we've got this common issue of interest that we're going to facilitate, and maybe have somebody talk about the topic for 5 or 10 minutes, and then let people just go back and forth and just have a dialogue, and do that throughout. So you're introducing people, but you're also bringing people back together.
That sounds great. I wonder, do you have, because the situation in the US is different than in Germany or in other places with regards to the pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen in wintertime if we get into another wave. How do you look to maybe allay fears of, social distancing? Do you have any policies in place with regard to that?
Well, the policies are changing day by day, as you can imagine, as you're probably experiencing in Europe. The U.S. is beginning to open more, and so what we're trying to do is do basic things. We'll have stickers on people's name badges that basically are colored, that if you're comfortable, being with somebody close, it's a green, or if you're a little apprehensive, maybe a yellow, and if you're not comfortable at all, a red. And so you stay your distance, and people will understand where that comfort level is. We'll obviously have hand sanitizers throughout. We'll have masks if people need an extra mask, those kind of things. We're trying to set it up so at this time, things are distanced as much as possible, working with the hotels. They've all gone through their own corporate activities. And so the Hyatt is ready for, if you want your room cleaned or you don't want your room cleaned, you can say those kind of things that really help people feel more comfortable in the environment. And I think the biggest thing that we're going to see in this is what's the global transportation requirements at this time, and where are countries in their process. We get a great deal of people from Europe, a great deal of people from South America in this meeting in December, and how far along will they be in the immunization process. And then just generally traveling. People, if they're not feeling comfortable yet, then they're not going to jump on a plane and come to Chicago. So we hope that things will start to open up by September or so. And we are looking at it on a weekly basis to see what we need to do to make people feel comfortable and accommodate their needs.
Right. Well, that sounds great. I really like the idea of the stickers too, because that way you kind of save people from having to verbalize that all the time. And some are really uncomfortable about it. It's just a very nice visual way to have like a signaling system for that. With regard to the outlook, maybe beyond the expo and the conference, if you look further on to next year and maybe even more, what would you say are maybe movements or trends in the seed industry that you can already detect?
Probably the biggest movement that has been driving almost everything that we work on today, I guess there's two, but one of the main ones is just that the rapid innovation and discovery within the genetics arena, the biology and genetics arena for plants and plant breeding. We were constantly working on what are the policies in the US and then policies internationally with respect to, right now, it's gene editing and CRISPR-Cas9 and other things along that line, and how our government's going to treat that as it goes forward. But it's whatever that next technique is. What are we doing? And then all of the factors that come around that. A lot of people don't understand the rapid movement that we're seeing or in discovery in genetics, and how do you deal with that, and how does it fit into, how do all of those pieces fit into new techniques like gene editing? It's a wonderful technique, but by itself, it's not effective. You've got to know the genetics of that plant. You've got to know if you've got molecular marker technology, you've got to, how does that fit into what I'm trying to get to for that ultimate end variety? And they all play together. And I don't think people understanding where those techniques are going so rapidly. Mm-hmm. The other issue that we are all on the cusp of internationally is sustainability. And what does that mean for our industry? It's being called many, many things: agroecology, sustainability, you name it. But what does that mean? How do you measure it? How do we help climate change in this? And we think we stand in a great place in the seed industry because we help provide solutions. And so that's where we're excited, but it's a lot of unknowns right now. And so we're staying on top of that. It's driving a lot of what we do, but even the base of that is the research and innovation that's going on in the seed sector today.
Well, it is even in your mission statement that, research is something that you support as part of your mission, as part of the work you do. And that was also what you just showed. Right. How do you support research, especially with regards to those two major factors you just mentioned? So the technique, genetics on the one side, and sustainability on the other.
Well, in the United States, we've got a system of land grant institutions, and every state has a land grant college or an identified land grant college that is in charge of agricultural research at that base level across their state to try to specialize in what they do. And it's not just research, it's education, economics, across the board. And what we try to do is work at the state and federal level for funding, first off, and making sure that they have the resources available. And as you can imagine, that's been challenging, depending on the year and depending on the economy of the state or the federal government. We always have some challenges there. And so we've got to continue to push to make sure that those resources are available. They train our next generation of workers in our industry. They also collaborate with the industry in discovery and innovation. And in a lot of cases, that's where gene editing and those techniques have come from, or mapping the genome. So we realize that we've got to have that base public, strong public research community. And so we work on constantly ensuring that we've got funding there. We work to help develop capacity on the U.S. level and the international level to help governments that may not have the resources that the U.S. does, to build base capacity for agronomic and plant breeding practices, or what we would call plant sciences, across the board, because it's needed to help any developing country continue to succeed and feed its people. And so the research is ongoing. And I would say the last part of it, Anna, that we work on extensively is just the education. I always say in my presentations, I ask the crowd, how many of you took a genetics class in college? Doesn't matter whether it's plant or human or animal. Maybe 10% raise their hand. I said, well, how many people finished the class, didn't drop the class, and passed it? Mm-hmm. And about half the hands go down. And then I ask how many people took another genetics class, and maybe 1 or 2%. So you think of the number of people out there who understand genetics or genomics in our industry, in our publics, is very small. So how do we help them in a straightforward, simple way understand the amount of discovery we've had just in the last 10 years in our industry? It's mm-hmm. mind-boggling. It's fascinating. And to me, it's exhilarating, but it's also frustrating in trying to explain how successful we've been to better understand what Mother Nature's given us. So that's where we spend a lot of our time, on that research component, helping to make sure that they've got the resources necessary, but also helping the public understand that what we're developing is safe for the environment, safe for consumption, all of those things. And it helps us to address things like sustainability, climate change, and those things impacting farmer production and the food on our table.
Well, that's a tall order. It feels like your days must be very long, but also exciting. Maybe just as a final question, what is the part of your work that you enjoy most?
Without a doubt, it's working with the young scientists that are coming out of our colleges and universities, who are really excited about that opportunity to make a difference. And whether they're looking at it from that standpoint of making a difference in a a small shareholder farmer in a developing country, or whether it's making a difference in California because of drought and fire and other natural disasters that are impacting them. They have a strong desire to make change through science and make change through discovery. And they see that ability to do that by the smallest, from the smallest component, and it's the seed. And they see the capacity that's there and the ability to make that change through that seed. And to me, that's just absolutely exhilarating. And I love to help them tell their story because they're really excited about it. And they've done a lot of work, obviously, to get where they are. A lot of study and a lot of field trials and a lot of failures and a number of successes. But that's the nature of the beast that they work in. And to see that excitement that they bring to their job every day is just outstanding. And so we look to continue to cultivate that in order to help us find solutions.
Thank you, Andy, for taking the time to join us here at the Computomics podcast to talk about your work. And to our listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did and gained some new insights into ASTA and the seed industry. We look forward to the expo in December and meeting you there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@computomics.com.